Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to help you get up to speed fast. Today, we're tackling maybe the most complex system there is, the human body.
It's an incredible journey we're starting.
We've got the core anatomy and physiology knowledge, from the textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
But we're mixing that with something else, something really practical.
Which is?
It's the meta lesson. If this stuff is so complicated, how do people actually learn it successfully? What works?
Ah, right. Yes, we're looking at the body's big communication systems, nervous, cardiovascular, endocrine. Think wiring, plumbing, chemical messages.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, the really actionable stuff, that comes from studies on student achievement. What predicts success when you're trying to grasp, say, how the heart works or how nerves fire?
Exactly. That blend of the what's and the how to learn it. We've pulled from standard A&P texts and combined them with research on students in regular courses and those big online ones, MOSCs.
So where do we begin? The brain seems logical, the command center.
Let's do it. Starting with the brain and its electrical chatter. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, there's that saying, I think it was Peter Kramer who wrote it originally. If the human brain were simple enough for us to understand, we would be too simple to understand it.
Huh, yeah. That sums it up pretty well. It's seriously complex.
It really is. And when you zoom in on the tissue itself, you basically find two main types of cells.
Okay.
You've got your neurons, they're the stars, really, specialized for sending information quickly using electricity.
The communicators.
Right. And then you have the glial cells, way more numerous, actually. They're the support crew.
Ah, the background team. What do?
They maintain the environment, provide structure, clean up waste, basically make sure the neurons can fire correctly. They're essential.
Okay, so about that firing. The action potential. That sounds fundamental.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
A neuron isn't just passive. It holds a little negative charge inside, like it's primed.
Ready to go.
Exactly. Then a stimulus comes along, and bang. Gates open, positive sodium ions flood in, the charge flips, that's depolarization. It's a wave, a spark that travels.
And it needs to travel fast, especially down long nerves, right? Like spine to foot.
Definitely. Speed is crucial. That's where mine comes in. It's like insulation wrapped around the nerve fiber, the axon.
Okay, insulation. But you said it travels fast. How does insulation help?
Well, it's not continuous insulation. There are these tiny, tiny gaps called the nodes of Ranvier.
Nodes of Ranvier, okay.
And the electrical signal doesn't just smoothly flow, it actually jumps from one node to the next, leaps down the axon.
Ah, like skipping stones?
Kind of. That mechanism, it's called saltatory conduction, makes the signal transmission much, much faster than if it had to travel along the entire membrane.
Got it. So the signal flies down the neuron. What happens at the end? How does it talk to the next cell?
Good question. Usually it switches from electrical to chemical. We're talking about chemical synapses. That's the most common way neurons communicate.
Chemical messengers, neurotransmitters.
Exactly. And here's a fascinating bit. The effect of that neurotransmitter, whether it excites the next cell or inhibits it, doesn't depend on the chemical itself.
Really? How does that work?
It depends entirely on the receptor protein on the receiving cell. The shape of the receptor determines the outcome. Take GABA, for example. It only binds to receptors that cause inhibition. It's the body's main brake.
So the message is in the lock, not the key.
Mm.
Interesting. Okay, let's zoom out from cells to brain regions. What about the front of the brain?
Right, microscopic function. The frontal lobe is heavily involved with motor functions, planning, and executing movement.
And just in front of that, the prefrontal cortex. I hear a lot about that.
Ah, yes, the prefrontal cortex. That's kind of the CEO of the brain. Executive functions live there, planning, decision-making, working memory, even aspects of your personality.
Personality, really?
Absolutely. There's a classic, if grim, case study, Phineas Gage, 19th century railroad worker.
I think I've heard of him. The iron rod.
That's the one. An explosion sent an iron rod straight through his prefrontal cortex. Miraculously, he survived. His memory was okay. He could walk and talk. But his personality completely changed. He went from being responsible and well-liked to impulsive, unreliable, profane. It was one of the first pieces of evidence showing how localized that kind of high-level function is. Who you are resides, in large part, right there.
Wow. That's profound. Okay, speaking of routing and pathways, let's talk vision. How does information from our eyes get processed?
It's another complex routing job. Light hits the retina, signals are generated, but they don't all go straight back.
There's a twist.
There is. Information from the inner half of each retina, the part closer to your nose, the medial retina, needs to cross over to the opposite side of the brain.
Crossover. Where?
At a specific junction point called the optic chiasm. It's like a little crossroads where these specific fibers, the axons from the medial retina decussate, they swap sides. The fibers from the outer lateral retina stay on the same side.
Okay, so inner halves cross, outer halves stay straight.
Yeah.
Why is that specific routing important?
Well, it creates a very specific vulnerability. Think about the pituitary gland. It sits just underneath the brain, right below the optic chiasm.
Right.
Now, imagine a tumor starts growing on the pituitary. As it gets bigger, it presses upwards right onto the optic chiasm.
Squeezing the crossroads.
Exactly. And what gets squeezed? Primarily those crossing fibers from the medial retinas.
Which process? Peripheral vision.
Precisely. The outer fields of vision for both eyes. So, pressure on the optic chiasm leads to a very specific pattern of vision loss. Loss of the lateral peripheral vision in both eyes. It's called bilateral hemianopia.
And it's not an eye problem, it's a brain wiring problem caused by a mechanical issue. Incredible.
It really underscores how structure dictates function and how interconnected everything is.
Okay, that's a lot on the nervous system. Let's pivot slightly. How about the other senses? And maybe some basic body mechanics.
Sounds good. Let's talk special senses. Smell olfaction is a really interesting one. It's kind of a rebel.
How so?
Almost every other sense, vision, hearing, touch, taste, routes its information through a central relay station in the brain called the thalamus.
The thalamus, okay, the big switchboard.
Right. But smell. It bypasses the thalamus altogether. Olfactory pathways connect directly into parts of the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe, areas involved in emotion and memory.
Which explains why certain smells can trigger such strong memories or feelings, right? Instantly.
That's thought to be a big part of it, yes, that direct connection.
What happens if you lose your sense of smell? Anosmia?
It can happen acutely, maybe from head trauma that physically damages the olfactory nerves.
Ouch.
Yeah, but it also often happens gradually with age. Those specialized sensory neurons in the nose, they actually have a fairly short lifespan, maybe a few months. And as we get older, the body's ability to replace them efficiently can decline, leading to a slow loss of smell.
Interesting. Okay, what about taste? Is it simpler?
In some ways, yes. It relies more on direct chemical detection. For example, the taste we perceive as sour is basically our brain registering the concentration of hydrogen ions H plus acidity.
So like lemon juice or vinegar.
Exactly. Even orange juice, which we think of as sweet, has a low pH, around 3. It is sour, chemically speaking, but the high sugar content usually masks that perception for us.
Right. And hearing. How do we know where sound is coming from?
That's a neat bit of neural computation. Your brain, specifically neurons in the medulla, compares the timing and intensity differences of the sound waves hitting each ear. Even minuscule differences allow it to calculate the sound source's location.
Tiny delays, big calculations. Okay, let's switch to the plumbing and delivery service, the circulatory system, red blood cells.
Erythrocytes, yes. The oxygen couriers. And they have a really clever design feature. They lack mitochondria.
No powerhouses. How do they function?
They rely entirely on anaerobic respiration making energy without oxygen. The brilliant part is, this means they don't use any of the oxygen they transport. It all goes to the tissues that need it.
That's efficient. Do they last forever?
No, they have a limited lifespan, around 120 days on average. Then they get recycled.
And how does the body know when to make more?
That's a classic example of homeostasis keeping things in balance. If your blood oxygen levels drop too low, a state called hypoxemia, specialized cells in the kidneys detect it.
The kidneys? I thought they just filtered waste.
They do that, but they're also crucial sensors for oxygen. When they sense hypoxemia, they release a hormone called erythropoietin, or EPO.
EPO. I've heard of that in sports doping.
Unfortunately, yes. But naturally, EPO travels to your bone marrow and signals it to ramp up production of red blood cells. More carriers mean oxygen levels return to normal. It's a beautiful feedback loop.
Okay, vital function. Now something very practical, CPR. If someone's heart stops, what's the key technique?
The guidelines are very specific based on physiology. You need to compress the chest hard and fast. Compression should be on the sternum, roughly between vertebrae T4 and T9.
How deep and how fast?
At least 5 centimeters deep for an adult, that's quite a bit. And the rate is critical, 100 compressions per minute. That rhythm is famously matched by the beat of the song Staying Alive.
Right, hard and fast. Keep the blood moving.
Exactly. Because cardiac output, the amount of blood the heart pumps per minute, is vital. It's basically heart rate times Stroke volume, the amount pumped per beat.
So faster heart rate means more output, right? Up to a point.
Up to a point, yes. During exercise, both heart rate and stroke volume increase initially, boosting cardiac output. But there's a catch, something our sources highlight.
What's that?
Once the heart rate gets too high, generally above about 160 beats per minute, cardiac output actually starts to decrease.
Wait, decrease. Pushing harder makes the heart less effective. How?
It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? But it's a mechanical limit. The heart beats so fast that the ventricles, the main pumping chambers, don't have enough time to fully relax and refill with blood between beats.
The filling time gets too short.
Precisely. That filling volume is called preload. If preload drops because the heart rate is excessively high, the stroke volume, the amount pumped out per beat, decreases. Even with a high rate, the reduced volume per beat leads to a net drop in overall output.
So there's a sweet spot for heart rate efficiency. Too fast is actually bad. That's a really key insight. Okay, let's try to integrate systems. How does the nervous system control chemical balance? Water, maybe?
Great example. Water balance is tightly regulated, primarily by the hypothalamus in the brain.
The hypothalamus again. Busy place?
Very. It contains specialized neurons called osmoreceptors. They constantly monitor the concentration of solutes, mainly sodium, in your blood's saltiness, basically.
And if it gets too salty, meaning you're dehydrated.
The hypothalamus detects that increase in osmolarity and signals the posterior pituitary gland, which is attached just below it, to release antidiuretic hormone, ADH.
Antidiuretic. So less peeing.
Essentially, yes. ADH travels to the kidneys and tells them to reabsorb more water back into the bloodstream instead of letting it go out as urine. This dilutes the blood, bringing its concentration back down to the normal range.
Another neat feedback loop. What about when hormone control fails, like diabetes?
Diabetes mellitus, yes. That's fundamentally a failure in regulating blood glucose, blood sugar. Insulin is the key hormone here.
And there are different types.
Two main types. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. The body's own immune system attacks and destroys the insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas. It's relatively rare, maybe less than 5% of all cases.
Okay, autoimmune. What's the other type?
Type 2 accounts for the vast majority, around 95% of cases. This is typically acquired later in life and is strongly linked to lifestyle factors like diet and inactivity. Here, the pancreas usually still makes insulin, at least initially, but the body's cells become resistant to its effects. They don't respond properly.
So the insulin is there, but the doors won't open for the glucose to get into the cells.
That's a good analogy. And the consequences of persistently high blood glucose are really serious over time.
What kind of problems does it cause?
It damages tissues throughout the body. Nerves are particularly vulnerable, leading to neuropathy, pain, numbness, tingling, especially in the hands and feet.
Nerve damage. Ouch.
And it also damages blood vessels. High glucose promotes inflammation in the artery walls, which accelerates atherosclerosis, hardening and narrowing of the arteries. Poor circulation combined with nerve damage is why foot problems can become so severe in uncontrolled diabetes.
A really dangerous combination.
Ah.
Okay, one more system interaction. The fight or flight response.
The sympathetic nervous system kicking into high gear. This is part of the autonomic nervous system controlling involuntary functions. When you perceive a threat, it triggers a cascade of physiological changes: increased heart rate, breathing, blood flow to muscles, glucose release.
Preparing the body for action.
Exactly. Though it's interesting, researchers sometimes expand on fight or flight now. They might add fright or even freeze as potential stress responses mediated by these systems.
Fight, flight, fright, or freeze. Acknowledging more complexity.
Yeah.
Okay, the body is just layers upon layers of control.
It truly is.
Right, now for that meta lesson, this is the part I find fascinating because it's so practical for you listening. If understanding all this physiology is so challenging, what actually helps people succeed? What predicts mastery?
Well, we looked at data from a big online course, a MOOC, on introductory human physiology. And honestly, the overall pass rate was quite low, typical for MOOCs, maybe around 3 to 6.5%.
Oof, low. But some people did well, paths with distinction.
Yes. And when the researchers dug into who those high achievers were, some patterns emerged. One clear factor was prior education. Students who already held graduate degrees were significantly more likely to pass with a distinction compared to those with, say, only a bachelor's or less.
Interesting. So having experience with higher level learning, maybe being better at self-directed study, helps tackle this material.
That seems to be a strong implication, yes. It wasn't just about what they knew before, but maybe how they knew how to learn complex subjects independently.
What else predicted success?
Active engagement was huge. Students who made 2 or more posts in the online discussion forums, asking questions, answering others, just participating, were much, much more likely to pass.
So not just lurking and reading, but actually engaging, making the information your own somehow.
It really seems that way. Externalizing your understanding or your confusion forces you to process it more deeply. Also, interestingly, self-reported fluency in English was higher among those who passed with distinction. Language clarity matters.
Okay, that's the online world. What about traditional classrooms? Did students value different things?
We saw findings there too. When students in regular physiology courses were asked what impacted their learning most, they rated the faculty teaching style as the most important factor.
More important than the course content itself.
Yes, significantly higher rated, on average, higher than the inherent difficulty of the material, and much higher than technological aspects of the course.
So how clearly and engagingly the professor explains things is paramount.
It seems so. Which, reinforces what we try to do here. Use clear language, analogies, make connections.
Absolutely. Break it down. And one more encouraging point from that research.
Yes. While having a science background obviously helped, it wasn't essential. About 17%, almost a fifth, of the students who passed the MOOC successfully were largely new to the subject.
So dedication and good learning habits can make up for a lack of prior knowledge. That's good news for anyone feeling intimidated.
Definitely. Effort and strategy matter.
Okay, so let's wrap this deep dive up. We've gone from the tiny electrical leaps in neurons
To the hard mechanical limits on how fast the heart can effectively pump.
to the delicate chemical balancing acts managing water and sugar.
And how hormones like ADH and insulin are crucial regulators there.
And the big takeaway for you, the listener trying to learn this, don't just be passive.
Exactly. Engage actively. Ask questions. Try to explain it yourself. Participate in discussions if you can. That active processing seems to be the real key. And prioritize clear explanations. Find teachers or resources that make sense to you.
Excellent advice. Now for that final thought to leave you with, something to mull over.
Okay, here it is, based on brain development. We know from neurological studies that the white matter in the cerebrum, the insulated wiring that speeds up communication between brain regions, isn't fully mature until a person is about 20 years old.
20. That late.
Roughly, yes. So, considering what we discussed about the prefrontal cortex, which is heavily reliant on this connectivity for planning, judgment, risk assessment, and impulse control, what might this slow, protracted development of white matter tell us about understanding behavior, decision-making, and maybe even vulnerability during adolescence?
That's a really interesting question about brain maturity and behavior.
Yeah.
Plenty to think about there. Thank you for diving deep with us today.